police. You're not allowed to be on this property.
Ma'am, this is my property.
Don't lie to me. People like you don't live in this neighborhood. Put the tools down now.
You really should think before you speak. You call the police, tell them you just threatened the state attorney in his own front yard.
On a brilliant Saturday afternoon in Oakland's Lake Merritt Park, where families gather and the smell of grilled food drifts across manicured lawns, a cell phone camera captured an encounter that would become a flashpoint in America's ongoing conversation about race, public space, and who gets to decide who belongs. A white woman, later identified as Jennifer BBQ Becky Schulte, stood beside a park ranger's vehicle, pointing repeatedly at a black family cooking on a small charcoal grill near the shoreline. She didn't know their names. She didn't know they had a permit. She only saw people she believed didn't belong and called armed enforcement to remove them. But within hours, her 2-hour confrontation with the Smithson family would explode into a viral phenomenon that cost her career, her reputation, and became a case study in how white fragility weaponizes authority against black joy. Because the family she was screaming at wasn't breaking any rules. They had followed every regulation. They had done everything right. Her mistake didn't just expose her prejudice. It ignited a movement. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps bring more truth to light.
The video begins shaky, then steadies. The frame captures Lake Merritt on April 29, 2018. It's 11:47 a.m. Temperature hovering around 68 degrees. The kind of California spring day where people emerge from their homes hungry for sunshine and community. In the lower right quadrant of the frame, the Smithson family. Javon Smithson, 38, a software engineer at a tech startup in San Francisco. His wife, Michelle, 36, a middle school science teacher. Their 2 children, Kayla, 8, and Marcus, 6, playing with a frisbee on the grass nearby. They've claimed a spot near the lake with a clear view of the water. A red and white checkered blanket spreads across the grass. A small Weber charcoal grill sits on the designated concrete pad, one of dozens scattered throughout the park specifically for public use. Smoke rises gently from burgers and hot dogs. This is their monthly ritual, the first family barbecue of the season. In the upper left of the frame, Jennifer Schulte, 43, a pharmaceutical sales representative from the neighboring suburb of Piedmont. White, blonde, wearing yoga pants and a fitted athletic jacket. Her face is tight with what she clearly believes is righteous indignation. She's been standing there for 23 minutes. The confrontation didn't start with the camera rolling. It started 30 minutes earlier, when Jennifer was walking her small white dog along the lake path. She saw the Smithson family setting up their grill. She stopped walking. She stared. Then she approached. According to witnesses who would later give statements, Jennifer's first words were not a polite inquiry. They were an accusation. You can't use charcoal grills here. This is a non-charcoal area.
Javon looked up from arranging the coals, his face showing the patient exhaustion of someone who'd had this exact conversation before, in different contexts. Actually, ma'am, we checked the park regulations. Charcoal grills are permitted in this section. We even called the Parks Department yesterday to confirm. Jennifer's jaw tightened. I've been coming to this park for 15 years. I know the rules. Michelle stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. We have the permit information on our phone if you'd like to see it. We're following all posted regulations. This is the moment where most people would apologize, feel embarrassed, and walk away. Jennifer doubled down. You're making the whole area smoky. You're disturbing other families. This is inappropriate. The camera, being filmed by another park visitor named Caitlin Wu, a 24-year-old grad student who'd been watching the interaction escalate, catches this moment. Caitlin would later say in interviews that something about Jennifer's tone, her body language, the way she was hovering over this black family with aggressive authority, triggered her instinct to document.
The video shows Jennifer with her phone pressed to her ear. Her free hand gestures sharply at the Smithson family. Yes, I need someone from Oakland Parks to come immediately. There's a family using an illegal grill and they're refusing to leave. Javon stands up, brushing charcoal dust from his hands. He's 6'2", broad-shouldered, and his mere act of standing seems to make Jennifer step back and speak louder into her phone. "Ma'am," Javon says, his voice carrying the careful modulation of a black man who knows any display of emotion will be weaponized against him. "We're not leaving. We have every right to be here. We have a permit. We paid the reservation fee. We're using a designated grill area." Jennifer's response is caught clearly on camera. People like you always think rules don't apply to them. At this moment, what would you have said to her? I want to hear it. The comment lands like a slap. Michelle's face hardens. Javon's hands curl into fists at his sides, then deliberately relax. Both of them understand exactly what "people like you" means.
Caitlin moves closer, her phone camera now clearly visible. Other park visitors begin to notice the commotion. A small crowd starts to form, not surrounding the family, but creating a loose perimeter of witnesses. Jennifer notices the cameras. Instead of deterring her, it seems to embolden her. She's convinced she's in the right, convinced she's protecting the park, convinced her 15 years of weekend walks give her authority over people who followed every rule. She calls 911. The audio on Caitlin's video captures fragments of the call. "Yes, I'm at Lake Merritt. There's a family having an illegal barbecue. They're using charcoal in a non-charcoal zone. They're being aggressive and refusing to comply." That last part, being aggressive, is demonstrably false. The video shows the Smithson family standing near the grill, not approaching Jennifer, not raising their voices, simply existing in the space they paid to reserve. A park ranger vehicle pulls up. Ranger Michael Torres, a 15-year veteran of Oakland Parks and Recreation, steps out. He's Latino, early 40s, and his body language immediately suggests he's exhausted before this conversation even begins. "What's the problem here?" Torres asks, his voice neutral. Jennifer rushes toward him, her words tumbling over each other. "They're using an illegal charcoal grill. They're creating smoke. They won't leave. I've told them multiple times they're breaking the rules." Torres holds up one hand. "Ma'am, let me check the situation." He walks to the Smithson family. Javon already has his phone out, showing the permit confirmation email and the park map highlighting designated charcoal grill zones. Torres examines it for maybe 15 seconds. Then he turns back to Jennifer. "Ma'am, this family is in compliance with all park regulations. Charcoal grills are permitted in this section. They have a valid reservation. There's no violation here." Jennifer's face flushes red. "That can't be right. I've been coming here for years." The regulations were updated 3 years ago. Charcoal grills are now allowed in designated zones. This is one of them. These folks have done everything correctly. This is the moment where most people would apologize and leave. Jennifer escalates.
"Then I want to file a formal complaint. They're still creating a disturbance. They're being hostile. I don't feel safe." The video captures Javon's face. He's not angry. He's not surprised. He looks tired. The bone-deep tired of someone who's played this scene 100 times in 100 different contexts. Michelle puts her hand on his arm. The children have stopped playing and moved closer to their parents, confused and frightened by the white woman who won't stop yelling. If you were the Smithson family, would you stay and finish your barbecue or pack up and leave to avoid further confrontation? Torres turns to Jennifer, his voice dropping to a tone that suggests this is his final word on the matter. "Ma'am, there's no complaint to file. They're not violating any regulations. You've been here for," he checks his watch, "over half an hour, arguing about rules that don't exist. I'm asking you to move along and let this family enjoy their afternoon." Jennifer's expression shifts. The righteous indignation hardens into something uglier. "Fine, I'll wait for the police." And she does, for another hour and 47 minutes.
What happens next becomes the surreal heart of the story. Jennifer doesn't leave. She positions herself approximately 20 feet from the Smithson family and waits. She's called 911 3 times now. Each call is logged. Each dispatcher has told her that unless there's an actual emergency or violation, police response will be low priority. But Jennifer waits anyway. The Smithson family faces an impossible choice. They can leave, abandon their permitted space, their paid reservation, their family tradition, and let this woman's harassment succeed, or they can stay and continue their barbecue while a white woman glares at them and multiple cameras document the absurdity of this situation. They choose to stay. Michelle flips the burgers. Javon tends the grill. The children, sensing their parents' tension but trying to maintain normalcy, sit on the blanket coloring with sidewalk chalk. More phones come out. More witnesses start recording. The crowd swells to nearly 30 people, most of them expressing support for the Smithson family, some offering them water and snacks in solidarity. One witness, a white man in his 50s named Robert Chen, approaches Jennifer. "Ma'am, you need to let this go. These people haven't done anything wrong. You are harassing a black family for having a barbecue." Jennifer wheels on him. "This isn't about race. I would do this to anyone breaking the rules." "But they're not breaking the rules," Robert says, his voice rising. "A park ranger already confirmed they're in compliance." "What are you really upset about?" Jennifer's face crumples and hardens simultaneously. She doesn't answer. She just keeps waiting. At 1:34 p.m., 2 hours and 14 minutes after Jennifer first approached the Smithson family, 2 Oakland police officers arrive. Should filing false 911 calls about people following all regulations carry criminal consequences? Drop your answer below.
Officers Denise Ramirez and James Wu step out of their patrol car with the visible demeanor of people who've already been briefed on exactly how ridiculous this call is. Dispatch has logged Jennifer's multiple calls. The Rangers have radioed in their assessment. The officers know before they arrive that there's no violation, no crime, no legitimate reason for their presence. But they're here anyway because Jennifer has weaponized their authority. Officer Ramirez approaches Jennifer first. "Ma'am, you called about an illegal barbecue?" "Yes." Jennifer's voice carries relief and vindication. "They've been here for hours, using a charcoal grill in a prohibited zone, creating smoke, being hostile." Ramirez holds up one hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Ma'am, we've already confirmed with Park Services that this family is in compliance with all regulations. They have a valid permit. They're in a designated charcoal grill zone. There's no violation." Jennifer's mouth opens and closes. "But I've been coming here for 15 years. "The regulations changed," Officer Wu interjects, his tone flat and professional, but with an edge of impatience. "You've been told this multiple times by multiple people, including a park ranger. You've made 3 911 calls about a non-emergency situation. Do you understand that's a misuse of emergency services?" The blood drains from Jennifer's face. Around them, phones continue recording. Caitlin's video, which has now been running for over an hour with brief interruptions, captures the moment when Jennifer realizes she's not the hero of this story. Officer Ramirez turns to the Smithson family. "Folks, I apologize for the disruption to your afternoon. You're welcome to continue your barbecue. You haven't done anything wrong." Javon nods slowly. "Thank you, officer. We appreciate that." Ramirez turns back to Jennifer. "Ma'am, you need to leave this area immediately. If you continue to harass this family, we can cite you for disturbing the peace." "Harass?" Jennifer's voice pitches up. "I'm trying to enforce the rules. I'm protecting the pork." "You're harassing a black family having a permitted barbecue," Officer Wu says, no longer maintaining professional neutrality. "And you've wasted 2 hours of Park Services time and police resources because you couldn't accept that you were wrong." Jennifer's face contorts. "This is discrimination. You're taking their side because they're right and you're wrong," Ramirez snaps. "Leave, now, or we'll cite you." Jennifer grabs her dog's leash and storms away, her face red, her hands shaking. She's muttering loud enough for nearby cameras to catch. This is unbelievable. This is what's wrong with this city. No one follows rules anymore. She doesn't know it yet, but Caitlin's video is already uploading to Twitter with the caption, "White woman calls cops on black family having a legal barbecue at Lake Merritt. This is #BarbecueBecky." Within 3 hours, it will have 400,000 views. Within 24 hours, it will have 12 million.
The internet works fast. By sunset on April 29th, Jennifer Schulte's face is everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, national news websites. The hashtag BBQBecky trends worldwide. Late-night talk shows prepare segments. Memes proliferate faster than Jennifer's employers can draft a response. The video evidence is damning because it's comprehensive. Multiple angles from multiple witnesses show Jennifer approaching unprovoked, the Smithson family calmly explaining their permit, Jennifer refusing to accept the park ranger's confirmation, Jennifer waiting for 2 hours despite being told repeatedly she was wrong, police arriving and immediately siding with the family, Jennifer's complete inability to admit error. The court of public opinion moves swiftly. Commentary pours in from civil rights organizations, cultural critics, everyday people who see themselves in the Smithson family's experience. This is what black families face constantly, scrutinized, questioned, policed for doing everyday activities white families do without a second thought. She couldn't conceive that a black family followed the rules better than she understood them. The entitlement to call armed police on children eating hot dogs because you don't think they belong. Jennifer's employer, a mid-sized pharmaceutical company, issues a statement within 36 hours. We are aware of the incident involving our employee. We're investigating and will respond appropriately. We do not condone harassment or discrimination in any form. Corporate language. Careful. Non-committal. But the pressure doesn't stop. Customers threaten boycotts. Employees express discomfort working alongside Jennifer. The company's social media accounts are flooded with demands for her termination.
Jennifer tries to defend herself. She releases a statement through a friend's Facebook account. "I was trying to protect the park I've loved for years. I wasn't trying to discriminate against anyone. I would have done the same thing regardless of race. People are taking this out of context and destroying my life over a misunderstanding." The statement backfires spectacularly. You spent 2 hours harassing a family with children. Where's the misunderstanding? Regardless of race is what every racist says right before explaining why they only call cops on black people. You had multiple people tell you they were right and you were wrong, and you still called 911 3 times. That's not concern, that's hatred. Oakland's mayor, Libby Schaaf, weighs in during a press conference about an unrelated issue. A reporter asks about the BBQBecky incident. "What happened to that family is unacceptable," Schaaf says firmly. "Lake Merritt is a public space that belongs to everyone. Weaponizing police against black families doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, following permits, following rules, simply existing, is a manifestation of the bias we're working to eliminate in Oakland." Should footage like this always be made public? Comment below. But this isn't an isolated incident, and the narrator's voice shifts to provide the broader context that explains why #BBQBecky resonated so powerfully. In the 6 months before the Lake Merritt incident, similar viral videos had documented white people calling police on black people for a black real estate investor inspecting a property he owned, a neighbor called police for suspicious activity, a black family using a community pool they had membership to, a white woman demanded to see their access cards, a black college student napping in her own dorm room common room, a white student called police for trespassing, a black child selling water on a sidewalk without a permit, a white woman called police on an 8-year-old, a black family checking out of an Airbnb they'd rented, a white neighbor called police for burglary. The pattern was undeniable. White people wielding police as weapons to remove black people from spaces, public parks, private pools, college dorms, residential neighborhoods, based purely
on the assumption that black presence equals criminal activity. Researchers at Stanford University studying these incidents coined a term, participation policing, the act of using law enforcement to police who gets to participate in public life. Dr. Sean Harper, executive director of the USC Race and Equity Center, explained in an interview following the BBQ Becky incident. These aren't isolated acts of individual prejudice. They're manifestations of systemic racism that teaches white people they have the authority to determine who belongs in shared spaces, and they're dangerous because they can escalate to violence. Every call to police on a black person doing nothing illegal is a potential death sentence. The statistics support this. Research from the Cato Institute found that between 2010 and 2016, black Americans were 2.5 times more likely than white Americans to be killed by police, and a significant percentage of those encounters began with calls about non-criminal activity, wellness checks, traffic stops, reports of suspicious behavior that turned out to be everyday life. The Smithson family understood this viscerally. When Jennifer made her first 911 call, Jevin told Michelle, "We stay calm, we stay polite. We don't give them any excuse," because they knew what Jennifer either didn't know or didn't care about. Her phone call could have gotten them killed. Within 1 week of the incident, multiple investigations were underway. Oakland Police Department opened an internal review of Jennifer's 3 911 calls. California law prohibits knowingly filing false reports with law enforcement, and the department needed to determine whether Jennifer's calls met that threshold. The review pulled the dispatch recordings. All 3 calls contained false or misleading information. Call number 1, they're using an illegal grill and refusing to leave. False, the grill was legal and they had no obligation to leave. Call number 2, they're being aggressive and creating a dangerous situation. False, video evidence shows no aggression whatsoever. And call number 3, I need police here immediately. I don't feel safe. Manipulative, Jennifer felt unsafe because she was told she was wrong, not because of any threatening behavior. California Penal Code 148.3 makes it a misdemeanor to falsely report a crime or emergency knowing the report to be false. The penalty can include up to 6 months in jail and a fine of up to $1,000.
But prosecution requires proving Jennifer knew her claims were false. Her defense would likely be, I genuinely believed they were violating regulations. The fact that a park ranger explicitly told her otherwise would undermine that defense. Oakland City Attorney Barbara Parker reviewed the case and made a calculated decision. Rather than pursue criminal charges that might not stick and would consume significant prosecutorial resources, her office issued Jennifer a formal citation for misuse of emergency services, a lesser infraction carrying a $500 fine and mandatory completion of a community education program. Jennifer's employer made their own calculation. On May 7th, 9 days after the incident, they announced her termination. Quote, after thorough review, we've determined that Ms. Schulte's actions are incompatible with our company values of inclusion, respect, and community responsibility. Her employment has been terminated effective immediately. Unquote. Jennifer didn't go quietly. Through her attorney, she threatened a wrongful termination lawsuit, claiming she was fired for exercising her rights as a concerned citizen. The company's legal team responded with a detailed documentation package showing customer complaints specifically citing discomfort with her employment, employee complaints about hostile work environment, company policy violations regarding conduct reflecting negatively on the organization, at-will employment status giving them broad discretion. The lawsuit threat evaporated. Jennifer's Homeowners Association in Piedmont also took action. Following complaints from multiple residents and national media attention focusing on their community, the HOA board issued a formal censure and launched an investigation into whether Jennifer's behavior violated community conduct standards. The investigation findings, released publicly due to media pressure, were scathing. Quote, Ms. Schulte's actions demonstrated prejudice, poor judgment, and abuse of emergency services. While this incident occurred outside our community, it reflects on our neighborhood's values and reputation. The board has unanimously voted to place Ms. Schulte on social probation and require completion of implicit bias training." Unquote. Social probation meant Jennifer couldn't participate in community events, use shared amenities, or serve on any HOA committees for 1 year. For a woman who'd built her identity around being an upstanding community member, the public rebuke was devastating. Do you think she should have lost her job for this? Drop your answer in the comments.
2 weeks after the incident, the Smithson family held a press conference at Lake Merritt, in the same spot where they'd been harassed. Javon and Michelle stood at a podium with their attorneys from the ACLU of Northern California. Their children were not present. The family had made a deliberate choice to shield Kayla and Marcus from further media exposure. Javon spoke first, his voice steady but weighted with emotion. "On April 29th, my family went to a public park to have a barbecue. We did everything right. We researched the regulations, we made a reservation, we paid the fee, we brought all required documentation, we chose a designated grill area, we followed every single rule. And we were still treated like criminals. Not because we did anything wrong, but because a woman looked at our black family and decided we didn't belong. She couldn't imagine that we'd followed the rules better than she understood them. She couldn't accept that a park ranger, police officers, and dozens of witnesses all confirmed we were right and she was wrong. She spent 2 hours trying to force us out of a space we had every legal right to occupy. And she weaponized 911 to do it." He paused, his jaw tightening. "People keep asking me, why didn't you just leave? Why stay and deal with her harassment? Because leaving would mean teaching my children that they don't belong in public spaces. That when white people question their right to exist somewhere, the correct response is to shrink, to apologize, to disappear. I will not teach my children that. My son is 6 years old. My daughter is 8. They need to see their father stand firm when someone tries to diminish us. They need to learn that we have rights, that we deserve dignity, and that we don't back down when we've done nothing wrong." Michelle took the microphone next. "I'm a teacher. I spend my days telling young people that the world is getting better, that equality is expanding, that education and kindness will overcome prejudice. And then I spend my Saturday getting harassed at a park barbecue. What happened to us happens to black families constantly. We get followed in stores, we get questioned in our own neighborhoods, we get police called on us for existing. When my daughter asked me why that woman was so angry at us, what was I supposed to say? Some people think our skin color makes us criminals even when we're eating hot dogs? That's a conversation no parent should have to have, but it's one black parents have every single day. Jennifer Schulte lost her job. She paid a fine. She got internet famous for being racist. Good. Maybe that will make the next person think twice before calling 911 on a black family doing nothing wrong."
But accountability for one woman doesn't fix the system that taught her we were threats in the first place. Their attorney, civil rights lawyer James Kwan, spoke last. "The Smithson family has asked me to make clear they're not pursuing civil litigation against Ms. Schulte. They could. They have grounds for harassment claims, emotional distress, violation of civil rights, but they've chosen a different path. They're working with civil rights organizations to develop training programs for parks departments, police, and 911 dispatchers specifically focused on recognizing and de-escalating bias-motivated calls. They're partnering with the ACLU to draft model legislation increasing penalties for false 911 reports that target people based on race. And they're turning their experience into education, speaking to community groups and schools about implicit bias and the real-world consequences of participation policing. Their goal isn't revenge, it's change. What part of the Smithson family's message hits you the hardest? Comment below. The immediate aftermath played out over the following months.
Jennifer Schulte completed her court-mandated community education program, a 16-hour course on implicit bias, cultural competency, and the history of weaponized police calls against Black Americans. According to the program coordinator, she attended but participated minimally, her body language suggesting resentment rather than reflection. She completed her HOA-required training as well, but by September 2018, 5 months after the incident, she listed her Piedmont home for sale. Real estate records show she purchased a property in a smaller town 90 miles north of Oakland shortly after. She attempted to rebuild her career in pharmaceutical sales, but found the Barbecue Becky label followed her. LinkedIn profiles, Google searches, background checks. Prospective employers found the videos, read the articles, and decided the liability outweighed her sales experience. As of 2024, public records suggest she works in an administrative role at a medical clinic, far from the public-facing position she once held. The Smithson family had their own reckoning. They returned to Lake Merritt for barbecues, but Javon installed security cameras at their home after receiving threatening messages from people who believed Jennifer had been treated unfairly. Michelle started carrying mace when she took the kids to the park. The psychological toll was real. Kayla developed anxiety about going to public spaces. Marcus asked his parents if they could just barbecue in the backyard instead. The family sought counseling to process the trauma of being criminalized for doing something completely ordinary.
But they also channeled their experience into activism. They partnered with the ACLU, the NAACP, and local Oakland organizations to create the Living While Black Education Initiative, a program bringing their story and others like it into schools, police academies, and corporate diversity trainings. The video of their harassment became a teaching tool, not for entertainment, but for education. The Oakland Parks Department revised its signage to make grill regulations clearer and more visible. They also implemented new training for rangers, specifically on recognizing and interrupting bias-motivated complaints. Oakland Police Department added a module to dispatcher training on assessing the legitimacy of suspicious activity calls, with specific attention to patterns suggesting racial bias. Dispatchers now ask additional questions when callers report non-criminal behavior and flag repeat callers who demonstrate concerning patterns. And California State Senator Scott Wiener introduced the Karen Act, a caution against racially exploitative non-emergencies, in 2020, making it explicitly illegal to make false racially motivated 911 calls. The legislation was inspired directly by incidents like Barbecue Becky and similar viral confrontations. The bill passed and became law, creating specific legal consequences for weaponizing emergency services based on racial bias. Do you think justice was served? Let me know in the comments.
Wake up, buddy. Sleeping out here lands you in jail today.
Been walking all night. Just needed a minute to breathe, man.
Did I ask? I said, get the hell up.
This is exactly why Americans hate cops nowadays. Undercover police chief, you're fired.
On a clear spring morning in Stonebrook City Park, a rookie officer made a mistake that would derail his career and expose a deeper systemic failure inside his department. Officer Tyler Knox, 24 years old, barely 6 weeks out of the academy, had been assigned to morning patrol and quality of life enforcement, a role typically reserved for officers trusted to exercise discretion and compassion. But at 7:43 a.m., his body camera captured him towering over a black man sitting quietly on a brightly colored metal bench, treating him with open mockery and hostility. Knox believed the man was homeless. He believed he was powerless. He believed he could treat him however he wanted. But the man he harassed was actually the department's own undercover chief of internal affairs, conducting a scheduled integrity test on new recruits. Within hours, Knox's behavior would spark a scandal that ended his employment and triggered a citywide investigation. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit subscribe. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light.
Tyler Knox grew up in Mercer Falls, a town with one stoplight and a population that barely cracked 4,000. His father had been a sergeant with the county sheriff's office for 23 years. His grandfather had been a state trooper. Law enforcement wasn't just a career in the Knox family. It was identity, legacy, expectation. Tyler wore his badge the way some people wear their last name, with pride that bordered on entitlement. At 24, Knox was the youngest officer in Stonebrook's 2024 Spring Academy class. His instructors described him as eager but emotionally immature. His field training reports noted strong technical skills. He could recite penal codes, execute traffic stops by the book, and handle firearms with precision. But his interpersonal evaluations told a different story. One supervisor wrote, "Knox treats policing like a competition he's trying to win." Another wrote, "Knox treats policing like a competition he's trying to win." The academy graduated him anyway. Stonebrook Police Department was short-staffed, operating at 72% capacity after budget cuts and a wave of retirements. Warm bodies with clean backgrounds and passing scores were prioritized over ideal temperament. Tyler Knox received his badge on a Friday. By Monday morning, he was patrolling alone. His assignment, downtown quality of life enforcement. That meant monitoring parks, transit hubs, and commercial districts for violations that fell into a gray area between criminal and civil: loitering, panhandling, public intoxication, sleeping in unauthorized areas. It was a role that required discretion, compassion, and the ability to distinguish between someone causing harm and someone simply existing in public space while poor, mentally ill, or unhoused. Tyler Knox possessed none of those qualities. What Knox didn't know, what almost no one in the department knew, was that Stonebrook Police Department had been running undercover integrity evaluations for the past 18 months. The program had been quietly implemented after a series of excessive force complaints and a Department of Justice consent decree that mandated reforms in accountability and training. Every 2 weeks, Internal Affairs deployed clothes officers into scenarios designed to test judgment, de-escalation skills, and compassion. Sometimes it was a staged domestic dispute. Sometimes it was a traffic stop with an actor playing an aggressive driver. Sometimes it was exactly what happened that Tuesday morning. A senior officer disguised as a vulnerable civilian placed in a public location waiting to see how patrol officers would respond. The tests weren't traps, they were mirrors. Officers who approached with professionalism, offered resources, and treated people with dignity passed without ever knowing they'd been evaluated. Officers who defaulted to intimidation, mockery, or force revealed exactly who they were when they thought no one important was watching. Only 3 people knew the schedule: the chief of police, the deputy chief of operations, and the head of internal affairs. Rookie officers were prioritized for testing because the department had learned a hard truth: bad habits formed early were nearly impossible to break later. Tyler Knox's test was scheduled for April 16th at 7:30 a.m. in Stonebrook City Park.
Captain Elijah Ward was 52 years old and had spent the last 11 years running internal affairs for Stonebrook PD. Before that, he'd worked narcotics, gang enforcement, and homicide. He'd been shot twice, decorated 4 times, and respected universally, not because he was soft, but because he was fair. Ward didn't play politics. He didn't cover for bad cops. He investigated complaints with the same rigor whether they involved a rookie or a deputy chief, and he'd personally recommended termination for 17 officers during his tenure. Ward was also black. That detail mattered because it shaped how he understood the stakes of integrity testing. He knew what it felt like to be profiled, to be treated as suspicious simply for existing in certain spaces. He knew the difference between an officer who genuinely couldn't tell the difference between a threat and a person, and an officer who simply didn't care. On the morning of April 16th, Ward arrived at Stonebrook City Park at 6:45 a.m. He wore layers of weathered clothing, a faded brown jacket with a torn pocket, dark jeans stained at the knees,
scuffed work boots with the laces frayed. His graying hair was unkempt. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. A worn canvas backpack sat beside him on the bench, the kind you'd see at a thrift store or a shelter donation bin. He looked tired. He looked forgotten. He looked exactly like the kind of person some officers believed didn't deserve courtesy. The bench he chose was painted bright blue, positioned along the main walking path near the park's east entrance. It faced a small pond where ducks gathered in the mornings. Joggers passed every few minutes. Dog walkers, early commuters cutting through on their way to the bus stop. The park was peaceful, bathed in soft daylight that filtered through oak trees just beginning to bloom. Ward sat with his head tilted back, eyes half closed, posture suggesting exhaustion rather than aggression. His body language was deliberately non-threatening. He wasn't drinking, he wasn't shouting, he wasn't bothering anyone. He was simply sitting, resting, existing in a public park during hours when the park was legally open to everyone. 3 surveillance cameras monitored the area. Internal Affairs had positioned 2 additional plainclothes officers nearby, one disguised as a jogger, another sitting in a parked car with a clear sightline. Ward's Bodycam was concealed inside the canvas backpack, lens angled toward the bench. Every angle was covered. Every word would be recorded. Every action would be documented. At 7:41 a.m., Officer Tyler Knox's patrol car pulled into the parking lot. Stonebrook City Park covered 42 acres of green space in the heart of downtown. It had been designed in the 1920s as a refuge from urban density. Winding paths, open lawns, clusters of trees, a central fountain that ran from April through October. By 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, the park belonged to the early risers. A woman in neon running shoes jogged past Ward's bench, earbuds in, barely glancing his direction. An older man walked a golden retriever that stopped to sniff the grass near the pond. A teenager on a skateboard carved lazy circles around the fountain, waiting for his school bus. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and damp earth. Birds called from the branches overhead. The fountain's water created a low, steady hum. It was the kind of morning that made you believe the world could be gentle. Ward heard Knox's patrol car before he saw it. The engine idled louder than necessary as it rolled slowly along the service road that curved through the park. Ward didn't turn his head. He kept his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and even, his posture suggesting someone too exhausted to care about much beyond the next few minutes of rest. The car stopped 30 feet away. Ward heard the door open, heard boots hit pavement, heard the deliberate, unhurried steps of someone who believed they owned the space they walked through.
Knox approached the bench with his chest out, shoulders squared, one hand resting on his duty belt near his radio. His body cam activated automatically when he exited the vehicle, a small red light blinking once before settling into steady recording mode. The camera captured everything from Knox's perspective: the bright blue bench, the canvas backpack, the man in worn clothing sitting motionless in the morning light. Knox stopped 6 feet away and studied Ward for several seconds. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were already making assessments, drawing conclusions, deciding who this person was and whether they deserved respect. Ward clocked him instantly, noticed the rookie confidence, the slight swagger, the way Knox stood like he was waiting for applause. Ward had seen 1,000 officers like this. Young men who believed authority was something you performed rather than something you earned. Men who mistook cruelty for strength and compliance for respect. The tension was already present, humming beneath the surface like voltage waiting for connection. Knox shifted his weight, cleared his throat, and spoke. What do you think Knox's real issue is? Ego, bias, or the pressure of proving himself? Knox's voice cut through the morning quiet, sharp and performative. Wake up, buddy. Sleeping out here will land you in jail today. Ward didn't move immediately. He let the words hang in the air for 3 seconds. Long enough for Knox to be uncomfortable. Long enough to establish that he wasn't going to respond to commands delivered like insults. Then he opened his eyes fully, turned his head slowly toward Knox, and spoke with the kind of calm that comes from absolute certainty. I'm not hurting anybody, just trying to rest. His voice was measured, deliberate, and completely devoid of fear. It was the voice of someone who knew exactly where this was going and had already decided how it would end. Knox didn't hear the warning. He heard defiance.
This ain't a hotel, man. You can't just camp out here whenever you feel like it. Knox stepped closer, narrowing the distance to 4 feet. His right hand moved from his belt to his hip, fingers drumming against his thigh, in a gesture that suggested impatience barely held in check. You got ID? Ward tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question from multiple angles. Am I being detained? Knox's jaw tightened. Don't start with that legal stuff. I'm asking you a simple question. Do you have identification? And I'm asking you a simple question. Am I being detained or am I free to go? Knox took another step forward. Now he was 3 feet away, looming over Ward, using his height and proximity as tools of intimidation. His body cam captured the angle perfectly, Knox's shadow falling across Ward's face, the physical imbalance, the deliberate invasion of personal space.
Ward didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't give Knox the reaction he was fishing for. He simply sat, hands resting on his knees, expression calm, and said, I'm not required to provide identification unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a crime. Have I committed a crime, officer? Knox's face flushed. His hand moved to his radio. You're about 2 seconds away from finding out what obstruction looks like. Obstruction, Ward repeated, slowly, as if tasting the word. For sitting on a bench in a public park during open hours. Interesting interpretation of the law. Knox's breathing quickened. His fingers twitched near his belt. The body cam captured his hand hovering near his taser, the yellow casing visible in the frame for just a moment before he caught himself and adjusted his stance. You think you're smart? Knox said, his voice dropping into something colder, meaner. You think because you know a couple legal terms you can sit here and waste my time? I'm not wasting your time, Ward said evenly. You approached me. I was sitting here quietly. You're the one who decided this needed to be a confrontation. Knox's hand went back to his taser. This time, he didn't move it away. The escalation. Stand up, Knox ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Stand up right now. Ward didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Knox's face, reading every micro-expression, cataloging every tell. He'd been a cop long enough to recognize the signs: elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, pupils dilated with adrenaline. Knox was spiraling, feeding his own anger, building to something he thought would prove his authority. I said stand up. Knox's voice cracked slightly, betraying the edge of panic beneath the aggression. He was losing control of the situation and couldn't figure out why. The man on the bench wasn't running, wasn't fighting, wasn't even raising his voice. But somehow, Knox felt like he was the one being cornered. Am I under arrest? Ward asked, his tone still maddeningly calm. You're about to be if you don't. On what charge? Knox closed around the grip of his taser. Trespassing, obstruction, disorderly conduct, pick one. I'm sitting on a public bench in a public park during daylight hours. None of those charges would survive 10 minutes in court, and you know it. I don't give a damn what you think you know, Knox shouted, his composure finally shattering. His hand pulled the taser halfway out of its holster, yellow plastic gleaming in the morning sun. You're gonna stand up, you're gonna show me your ID, and you're gonna do it right now, or I swear to God. Or what? Ward interrupted, his voice cutting through Knox's tirade like a blade. You'll tase a man for sitting on a bench? You'll arrest someone for exercising their constitutional rights? Is that the kind of officer you want to be?
Knox's entire body was trembling now, caught between the urge to escalate and the faint, distant alarm bell ringing in the back of his mind that told him something about this didn't feel right. But his pride, his ego, his desperate need to win this confrontation drowned out that warning. Get the hell up! Knox roared, his face inches from Ward's now, spittle flying with the force of his words. You think I'm playing? The jogger who'd passed earlier had stopped 30 feet away, phone out, recording. The man with the golden retriever had frozen mid-step, staring. The teenager on the skateboard had abandoned his board and was watching with wide eyes. Knox didn't notice any of them. His entire world had narrowed to the man on the bench who refused to be intimidated, refused to comply, refused to give him the victory he thought he deserved. Ward looked up at Knox. His expression shifted, not to fear, not to anger, but to something harder, something final. "Glad you finally showed your true colors," Ward said quietly. He reached into his jacket. Knox's hand flew to his taser, yanking it free, his finger on the trigger, Bodycam capturing every millisecond of the movement. And then Ward pulled out a gold badge. Not a wallet, not a weapon, not anything Knox's panicked mind had imagined. A badge. Gold. Engraved. Official. Ward's held it directly into the Bodycam's frame, angling it so the lens caught every detail. The shield, the eagle, the words stamped across the metal in bold letters. Ward's voice dropped to something quiet, measured, and devastating. "Undercover police chief, congratulations, you're fired." The collapse. Knox's face went white, not pale, white, the kind of bloodless white that happens when your brain suddenly understands that everything you thought was true is actually a catastrophic mistake. His hand, still holding the taser, began to shake. The weapon dipped, then dropped to his side, hanging useless from fingers that had gone numb. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes, wide, frantic, disbelieving, locked onto the badge, then flicked to Ward's face, then back to the badge, as if staring harder might somehow change what he was seeing. Knox's voice cracked. I didn't. Ward stood slowly, deliberately, pocketing the badge and stepping past Knox without another word. His movement was unhurried, almost casual, the kind of calm that comes from having complete control over the situation and zero doubt about the outcome.
Knox turned, stumbling slightly, watching Ward walk toward the park entrance. "Sir, wait, I can explain." Ward didn't turn around. He pulled a radio from inside his jacket, a real radio, department issued, not the civilian prop Knox had assumed he didn't have, and keyed the mic. "Command, this is Captain Ward. Integrity test complete. Requesting supervisor response to Stonebrook City Park East entrance. Officer requires immediate removal from duty." His voice was professional, clinical, empty of emotion. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disappointed. He was simply reporting facts, the way you'd report a malfunctioning piece of equipment that needed to be taken offline. Knox's legs buckled. He caught himself against the bench, Bodycam shaking with the movement, frame wobbling as he fought to stay upright. His breathing came in short, rapid gasps. His hands trembled so badly he had to clasp them together to stop the shaking. The jogger with the phone was still recording. The man with the dog stood frozen, mouth slightly open. The teenager whispered something to someone on his phone, voice hushed and awed. "Dude, you're not going to believe what just happened." Knox tried to speak again. "Captain, please, I thought—" Ward finally stopped walking. He turned, looked back at Knox with an expression that held no sympathy, no forgiveness, nothing but the cold assessment of someone who'd seen exactly what he needed to see. "You thought he was powerless. You thought he was someone you could treat however you wanted because nobody would care. That's the problem, Officer Knox. That's always been the problem." He turned and kept walking. Knox sank onto the bench, the same bright blue bench where Ward had been sitting moments earlier, and buried his face in his hands. The Bodycam kept recording. The birds kept singing. The fountain kept running. And Tyler Knox's career, all 6 weeks of it, was over.
2 patrol cars arrived within 4 minutes. Sergeant Rachel Odom and Sergeant Marcus Tillman, both 15-year veterans, both aware of the integrity testing program's existence, even if they didn't know the schedule. They stepped out of their vehicles with expressions that told Knox everything he needed to know. This wasn't a rescue. This was a retrieval. Odom approached first. She was 42, compact and no-nonsense, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd worked with Knox during his field training rotation and had flagged him then for attitude issues. Her notes had been ignored. "Officer Knox," she said, her voice flat and official. "I need your service weapon, your badge, and your body cam, right now." Knox looked up, his face streaked with tears. He hadn't realized he'd been crying. "Sergeant, I didn't know—" "Weapon, badge, camera." Odom's hand extended, palm up, finger steady. "This isn't a conversation." Knox's hands fumbled with his duty belt. He unholstered his Glock 19 with shaking fingers, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and handed it over, grip first. Then his badge, the metal still warm from his body heat. Then the body cam, its red light still blinking, still recording the moment of his professional execution. Odom took each item without comment and passed them to Tillman, who placed them in evidence bags with the kind of clinical precision that made the whole scene feel like a crime scene, which, in a way, it was. "Stand up. You're going to walk to Sergeant Tillman's vehicle. You're going to sit in the back seat. You're not under arrest, but you're not free to leave. Internal Affairs is en route. Do you understand?" Knox nodded, mute, broken. "I need verbal confirmation, Officer Knox." "I understand," he whispered. Tillman opened the rear door of his patrol car. Knox climbed in, moving like someone in a dream, slow, disconnected, unable to fully process what was happening. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded final. Odom keyed her radio. "Dispatch, scene secured, subject contained, awaiting IA. The investigation begins." Captain Ward had moved to the park's east entrance, standing beneath an oak tree with his arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with the detached focus of someone conducting a performance review. Two plainclothes internal affairs investigators, Detective Lisa Huang and Detective Jerome Foster, had emerged from their observation positions and were now coordinating witness interviews. Huang approached the jogger who'd been recording. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Huang with Internal Affairs. I understand you witnessed the interaction between the officer and the individual on the bench. Would you be willing to provide a statement?" The jogger, mid-30s, wearing a fitness tracker and expensive running shoes, nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. I recorded the whole thing. That cop was completely out of line. The man on the bench wasn't doing anything wrong, and the officer just kept escalating. It was like he wanted a confrontation." "Can you send me that video?" Huang handed her a card with an encrypted submission portal. "We'll need it for the investigation file." "Already uploading it," the jogger said, tapping her phone. "I've seen too many videos of cops abusing people. I'm not letting this one disappear." Foster was interviewing the man with the golden retriever, whose statement mirrored the jogger's. "I've been walking my dog in this park for 8 years. I've seen people sleeping on benches, and I've seen cops handle it a dozen different ways. Most of them just ask if the person needs help or tell them about shelter resources. I've never seen one go full aggro like that. It was disturbing." The teenager with the skateboard had called 3 friends, all of whom were now standing near the fountain, phones out, posting clips to social media with captions like "Cop threatens homeless man who turns out to be undercover chief" and "Instant karma." The story was already spreading. Ward pulled out his department-issued phone and opened a secure note-taking app. He began typing his preliminary report, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Integrity test evaluation. Officer Tyler Knox, number 4475. Date, April 16, 2024. Time, 0748 to 0758. Location, Stonebrook City Park, East Entrance. Test scenario. Vulnerable civilian in public space, homeless presentation. Evaluator, Captain E. Ward, Internal Affairs. Summary. Officer Knox approached test subject with immediate hostility. No offer of assistance. No attempt to determine need for services. Defaulted to intimidation tactics within 30 seconds of contact. Escalated to threats of arrest and physical force despite subject's calm demeanor and legal compliance. Drew taser in response to non-threatening civilian exercising constitutional rights. Displayed clear bias indicators in language and body language. Failed to recognize de-escalation opportunities. demonstrated fundamental unsuitability for field duty. Recommendation: immediate termination, psychological evaluation required before any future law enforcement employment. Flagged for post-decertification review. Ward attached the Bodycam footage, the surveillance camera footage from 3 angles, and the witness statements that were already pouring into the IA database. By the time he finished, the case file was airtight. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the parking lot. Deputy Chief of Operations Angela Martinez stepped out, followed by the department's lead attorney, Robert Chen. Both wore expressions that suggested they'd been expecting bad news, but were still disappointed by how bad it actually was. Martinez walked directly to Ward. How bad?
Ward handed her his phone, the preliminary report open on the screen. Martinez read in silence, her jaw tightening with each line. When she finished, she closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. 6 weeks, she said quietly. We gave him a badge 6 weeks ago. And this is who he was the entire time, Ward replied. We just caught it early. Chen looked toward the patrol car where Knox sat slumped in the back seat. He's going to try to appeal. Union will fight for him. Let them, Ward said. The footage speaks for itself. We've got body cam, surveillance, and 3 civilian witnesses, all corroborating the same narrative. He approached a peaceful person sitting in a public park and escalated to the point of drawing a weapon because the man wouldn't comply with unlawful orders. There's no defense. Martinez nodded slowly. I'll notify the chief. He'll want to handle the press conference personally. Good, because this needs to be loud. If Knox was willing to treat someone he thought was homeless like this, someone he thought had no power, no voice, no ability to fight back, imagine how he would have treated people once he felt comfortable, once he had tenure, once he had a union protecting him. Chen pulled out his tablet and began drafting termination paperwork. I'll have the separation documents ready within the hour. No severance, no recommendation. Badge surrendered, POST certification flagged. Martinez looked at Ward. You okay? Ward shrugged. I sat on a bench for 20 minutes. Knox is the one whose life just imploded. That's not what I asked. Ward was quiet for a moment, then said, I've been black in America for 52 years. I've been a cop for 28. I know what it's like to be on both sides of that interaction. So, yeah, I'm okay. But I'm also tired, because this is the 4th rookie we've tested this year, and Knox is the 2nd one who failed this badly. That's not a training issue. That's a culture issue. Martinez didn't have a response for that, because Ward was right. The phone call. Inside the patrol car, Tyler Knox pulled out his personal cell phone with trembling hands. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the one labeled Dad and pressed call. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Tyler? You at work? Dad, I messed up. What did you do? There was this guy in the park. He looked homeless. I thought I was just trying to do my job, and Tyler, what did you do? He was internal affairs. It was a test. I didn't know. He had a badge, and I drew my taser, and now they're saying You drew on a superior officer? His father's voice went cold, flat, the way it did when he was trying to control his anger. You pulled a weapon on someone from internal affairs during an integrity test?
Hey, step away from that car. We got reports of a stalker out here.
Sir, I'm doing my job.
Yeah? Doing what?
Officer, I need you to back up right now.
Who the hell you think
The federal probation officer. Your body cam just captured you blowing an active investigation. Congratulations.
On a clear, quiet afternoon in Redwood Heights, a rookie officer made a mistake so reckless it detonated a federal investigation and nearly got an innocent man, a federal officer, killed. His body cam captured every second of it. The footage begins with a black man standing beside a parked sedan, watching a vehicle down the block with laser-focused attention. He's calm, controlled, working. But rookie officer Daniel Keene storms into frame, hyped and ready for a confrontation. "Hey, step away from that car! We got reports of a stalker out here!" Within seconds, Keene escalates, grabs for cuffs, and pushes a federal officer to the brink of blowing his cover. Then the man lifts a gold badge. "Federal probation officer, and your body cam just captured you blowing an active investigation." What happened next cost the department $7.9 million and ended Teen's career before it ever started. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit subscribe. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Redwood Heights, a suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Sacramento, California. Mid-afternoon on a Wednesday in early September. The kind of day where the heat had broken, but the sun still felt warm. Where residential streets were quiet except for the occasional car passing. Where people were at work and children were still in school. Darius Cole, 38 years old, sat in his unmarked sedan parked on Maple Street, his eyes fixed on a house 3 doors down. He'd been there for 2 hours, maintaining visual surveillance on a gray Honda Civic parked in the driveway of that house. The car belonged to Trent Williams, a federal probationer who'd violated the terms of his supervised release by failing to report, cutting off his ankle monitor, and disappearing for 3 weeks. Darius was a federal probation officer with the U.S. Probation and Pretrial Services Office. 12 years of experience supervising high-risk offenders, conducting investigations, and apprehending probation violators. He wasn't a glorified social worker checking in on people. He tracked dangerous individuals who demonstrated they couldn't follow court orders, who often had weapons violations, who sometimes chose to run rather than face consequences. That Wednesday, Darius was working a fugitive apprehension case. Trent Williams had been convicted of federal weapons trafficking, served 4 years, been released on supervised probation with strict conditions. When he cut his monitor and vanished, the court issued a violation warrant. The U.S. Marshals Service would eventually handle the actual arrest, but Darius's job was to locate Williams first, gather intelligence, confirm his whereabouts, establish patterns of movement. Through investigative work, interviewing associates, checking phone records, surveillance of known contacts, Darius had identified Williams's girlfriend's house in Redwood Heights as a likely location. He'd been conducting surveillance for 3 days, documenting vehicle arrivals and departures, noting patterns, waiting for Williams himself to appear. The surveillance was completely legal. Darius was on a public street, observing a house where a fugitive was believed to be hiding, gathering information for a federal warrant. He'd coordinated with his supervisor at the probation office, who knew his location, and checked in every 30 minutes via encrypted phone calls. He wore civilian clothes to avoid drawing attention. His federal credentials were in his jacket pocket. His service weapon was holstered at his hip, concealed. Everything was textbook professional surveillance, patient, methodical, documented, coordinated with proper authorities. He'd done this type of work hundreds of times over 12 years without incident. Locate the fugitive, confirm presence, coordinate with the marshals for safe apprehension. No drama, no mistakes. But Darius also knew that being a black man sitting in a car in a suburban neighborhood could trigger suspicion from residents who'd never consider that he might be law enforcement. He'd dealt with that reality his entire career, being questioned about his presence in spaces, having his legitimacy doubted, needing to prove he was a federal officer rather than being assumed to be one.
That Wednesday afternoon, his awareness of that reality would prove justified. Would you have kept your cool the way Darius did if a cop rushed you during a federal operation? Officer Daniel Keene, 24 years old, had been with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department for exactly 3 months and 8 days. He'd graduated from the academy with passing but unremarkable scores, been assigned to patrol in the Redwood Heights sector after minimal field training, and was operating with the dangerous combination of minimal experience and maximum desire to prove himself.
His training file contained warnings that had been noted but not adequately addressed. Officer Keene demonstrates impulsive decision-making under pressure, tendency to escalate situations that could be resolved through communication, needs additional work on de-escalation and threat assessment, recommend extended field training before solo patrol authorization. But extended training cost money and time the department didn't want to invest. Keene met minimum qualifications, and bodies were needed on patrol. So he'd been cleared for solo duty with those warnings simply filed away. His 3 months of patrol had been frustrating for him. Mostly routine calls, minor traffic stops, paperwork, the mundane reality of police work. He wanted action, wanted to make arrests, wanted to prove he could handle dangerous situations. That desire made him see threats and opportunities for enforcement in situations where more experienced officers would recognize routine, legal activity. At 2:47 p.m. that Wednesday, dispatch transmitted a call. Suspicious person, Maple Street, Redwood Heights. Caller reports male subject sitting in vehicle for extended period, watching houses, possible stalking behavior. The call had come from Mrs. Helen Morrison, a 71-year-old resident who'd noticed Darius's car parked on the street for hours, and had decided his presence must be criminal. She called 911 not because she'd observed any specific illegal activity, but because she'd seen a black man sitting in a car, and her brain had translated that into "doesn't belong here, must be up to something." Keene responded immediately, his adrenaline spiking at the possibility of actual police work. He didn't request backup, didn't call for additional information about the suspicious behavior, didn't consider that someone sitting in a car might have perfectly legal reasons for being there. He just responded fast, eager, ready for confrontation. His AXON Bodycam activated as he pulled his patrol car onto Maple Street and spotted Darius's sedan. The footage captured his rapid approach, his aggressive body language, his hand already positioned near his service weapon before he'd gathered any information about the situation. Who do you think is more dangerous, an inexperienced officer or an unchecked one? The footage that would later be viewed over 20 million times across various platforms showed exactly what happened when inexperience met bias, when eagerness overrode judgment, when assumptions replaced assessment. The Bodycam perspective captured Darius from about 10 feet away, a black man in his late 30s, wearing jeans and a casual jacket, standing beside his sedan, his eyes focused down the street toward the Tardick house. His posture was relaxed but alert, the stance of someone working, observing, professional. His hands were visible at his sides. His demeanor communicated calm competence rather than furtive behavior. Everything about the scene should have suggested to a trained observer that this was law enforcement conducting surveillance. The unmarked but well-maintained vehicle, the professional attire, the focused observation rather than nervous scanning, the confidence of someone who had every right to be exactly where he was. But Keene didn't observe. He reacted.
The audio captured his approach. Rapid footsteps, elevated breathing, voice already raised before he'd assessed anything. "Hey, step away from that car. We got reports of a stalker out here." Darius turned slowly, his movements deliberate, his expression shifting from focused concentration to recognition of a problem. His voice was calm, controlled, carrying authority. "I'm working. Back up." The body cam captured Keene's response. Not de-escalation, not inquiry, but escalation. His hand moved toward his handcuffs. His shoulders squared. His voice took on edge. "Yeah? Doing what?" The footage showed the power dynamics clearly.
Keene operating on adrenaline and assumption, Darius operating on 12 years of professional experience, and the knowledge that any wrong move could turn this encounter deadly, the rookie officer seeing defiance, the federal officer seeing danger. Darius's voice remained level but carried unmistakable warning. "Officer, I need you to back up right now." Keene interpreted this as challenge to his authority, rather than instruction from someone who understood the situation better than he did. "Who the hell you think you're—" The body cam captured the critical moment. Darius's hand moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into his jacket pocket. Keene's hand moved to his service weapon, his body tensing, preparing to draw on a federal officer conducting a lawful surveillance. Do you think Keene would have reacted the same way if Darius didn't fit the caller's bias? Then Darius's hand emerged from his jacket holding a black leather credential case. He flipped it open with practiced motion, holding it at eye level so the body cam would capture it clearly. A gold badge, unmistakably federal, with official identification beneath. Darius Cole, U.S. Probation Officer, District of Eastern California. Federal Probation Officer. The body cam captured Keene's face perfectly. The instant transition from aggressive confidence to dawning horror. His hand dropped from his weapon, his mouth opened but no words came. His eyes moved between the badge and Darius's face, his brain struggling to process that he'd just confronted a federal officer during an active investigation. Darius snapped the credential case closed, his voice carrying cold authority and barely controlled anger. "Your body cam just captured you blowing an active investigation under active warrant. Congratulations." The surveillance was compromised. The house was now alerted to police presence, a marked patrol car parked conspicuously on the street, a uniformed officer confronting someone in what residents would interpret as an arrest situation. If Williams was inside or arrived and saw the scene, he'd recognize law enforcement and flee before the marshals could coordinate the arrest. 3 months of investigative work, weeks of surveillance, coordination with federal authorities, all potentially destroyed because a rookie officer saw a black man sitting in a car and decided that must be criminal. At this point, what would you have done if you were Darius?
Darius pulled out his encrypted phone and called his supervisor at the probation office, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Sir, I've been confronted by a local deputy during surveillance. Cover is blown. Target house is alerted. We need to pull back and reassess." His supervisor's response was immediate. Coordinate with the marshals, document everything, and filed a formal interference complaint. The investigation was being compromised not by clever fugitive evasion, but by a rookie cop's racial profiling. The surveillance team that had been positioned at various points around the neighborhood, other probation officers, a marshal observing from a different vantage point, all had to abort. They pulled back, hoping Williams hadn't been tipped off yet, knowing they'd have to start surveillance planning from scratch. Williams, who'd been inside the girlfriend's house, had indeed noticed the commotion. He'd seen the patrol car, seen Keene confronting someone, recognized the signs of law enforcement activity. Within an hour, he'd slipped out the back, called a friend for pickup, and disappeared again. It would take another 5 weeks to relocate him, this time in a different state, requiring coordination with out-of-state probation offices and additional marshals' resources. All because Keene had seen a black man sitting in a car and assumed stalker rather than considering law enforcement. Keene stood frozen on the street, beginning to understand the magnitude of his error. Darius didn't stay to educate him. He had a compromised investigation to report, a supervisor to brief, and a fugitive who was now alerted and mobile. Keene returned to his patrol car and called his sergeant, his voice shaky. "Sarge, I've got a situation. I confronted someone on surveillance, and it turns out he's a federal probation officer. I think I messed up their case." Sergeant Linda Patterson arrived within 15 minutes, having coordinated with dispatch to get the full details.
She was a 17-year veteran who'd seen rookie mistakes before, but recognized immediately that this one carried federal implications. She pulled Keene aside, her voice low but undismayably angry. Walked me through what happened. Keene's account revealed the cascade of failures. Received vague stalking call, arrived and saw a black man sitting in car watching houses, assumed criminal activity, confronted without gathering information, escalated when the subject told him to back off, nearly drew weapon, finally saw federal credentials. Did you run the plate before approaching? No, ma'am. Did you observe any actual illegal activity? He was just sitting there watching. Sitting in a car isn't illegal. Surveillance is legal. Did you consider he might be law enforcement? I didn't think. No, you didn't. You responded to a vague call from a resident who was probably just uncomfortable seeing a black man in the neighborhood, and you immediately assumed criminal activity, then confronted a federal officer conducting official duties, compromised his investigation, and nearly pulled your weapon on him. She'd already made the call to internal affairs before arriving. This wasn't just a rookie mistake. This was interference with federal law enforcement, racial profiling, and a near use of force against a federal officer. The consequences would extend far beyond department discipline. Do you think the department tried to protect Keene or themselves?
The U.S. Probation Office filed a formal complaint with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department within 24 hours, documenting the interference with federal operations. The complaint was copied to the U.S. Marshals Service, the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility, and the Civil Rights Division. The complaint detailed, Officer Keene confronted a federal officer during lawful surveillance. Officer Keene ignored identification and professional directives. Officer Keene's presence and marked vehicle compromised operational security. Officer Keene's actions resulted in fugitive being alerted and fleeing. Officer Keene's actions were based on racial profiling rather than legitimate suspicion. The department's internal affairs investigation ran parallel to the federal review. IA examined Keene's training file, his pattern of stops during his brief career, his response to the surveillance situation, and the body cam footage that captured everything. The analysis revealed concerning patterns. Keene had made 34 stops or investigations during his 3 months of solo patrol. 26 of those had involved black individuals, 76% of his enforcement actions in an area where black residents comprised 19% of the population. Of those 26 stops, 23 had resulted in no citation, arrest, or evidence of criminal activity. He was initiating contact with black people based on presence rather than behavior, generating false positives at a rate that proved racial bias. His supervisors had documented concerns during field training, tends to see threats where none exist, particularly with minority subjects. Needs coaching on when not to initiate contact. Recommend additional supervised time before solo clearance. All ignored because staffing needs outweighed proper training. The body cam footage became the centerpiece of both investigations. Federal reviewers watched it frame by frame, Keene's aggressive approach, Darius's calm professionalism, the escalation despite clear directives, the near weapon draw, the shocked realization when credentials were shown. One federal reviewer noted in the investigation file, Officer Keene approached a federal officer conducting lawful surveillance with immediate aggression based solely on the officer's race. His inability to recognize professional law enforcement behavior, combined with his escalation despite clear warnings, created a situation that could have resulted in violence against a federal officer. This represents both individual failure and institutional failure in training and supervision. The Sacramento County Sheriff faced a choice: take accountability immediately or fight the federal complaints and inevitable lawsuit. The body cam evidence made fighting impossible.
The county's insurance carrier reviewed the footage and advised immediate settlement negotiations to avoid a trial that would generate even more negative publicity and likely result in a larger verdict. Keene was terminated within 6 weeks of the incident. The termination letter was direct. Officer Keene's actions on September 11th constituted gross misconduct. He confronted a federal officer conducting lawful duties based on racial profiling. He compromised a federal fugitive investigation. He escalated a situation that posed no actual threat. His pattern of stops demonstrates racial bias. He is unsuitable for law enforcement.
His post-certification was revoked. His name was entered into the National Decertification Index. He would never work in law enforcement again in any state. Darius Cole filed a comprehensive federal civil rights lawsuit 9 months after the incident. The complaint named Officer Daniel Keene individually, his field training supervisor, and the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. The legal claims were extensive. Count 1. Interference with federal law enforcement. Keene's confrontation disrupted a lawful federal investigation, resulting in a fugitive fleeing and requiring additional resources to relocate and apprehend. Count 2. Fourth Amendment violation. Unlawful detention. Keene detained Darius without reasonable suspicion, based solely on a vague call and racial assumptions. Count 3. 14th Amendment violation. Racial discrimination. Keene's stop was motivated by racial bias, as evidenced by his pattern of disproportionate stops of black individuals. Count 4. Assault on a federal officer. Keene's near draw of his weapon while confronting a federal officer constituted assault under federal law. Count 5. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Being confronted at gunpoint while conducting federal duties, having his investigation compromised, and facing the possibility of violence caused severe distress. Count 6. Municipal liability. The department's inadequate training, ignored warnings about Keene's bias, and clearing him for duty despite documented concerns enabled the violations. The lawsuit sought $12 million in damages, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and comprehensive reforms. The county settled for $7.9 million 13 months after the incident. The settlement included $7.9 million payment to Darius Cole, Officer Daniel Keene permanently barred from law enforcement, terminated, decertified, NDI entry ensuring unemployability in any law enforcement capacity, and comprehensive department reforms.
Mandatory training on recognizing federal law enforcement operations, protocol requiring verification of vague suspicious person calls before approach, extended field training to minimum 20 weeks with no exceptions, monthly analysis of stop patterns by race with immediate intervention for disparities, zero tolerance for stops based on resident discomfort rather than criminal behavior, federal liaison position to coordinate law enforcement operations, public acknowledgement, written statement acknowledging Keene's conduct violated federal law and constitutional rights, endangered a federal officer, and reflected institutional training failures. Has America actually learned, or just apologized loudly and changed nothing? The Bodycam footage from that September afternoon became more than just evidence in a lawsuit. It became a case study used in training programs across the country, a reference point in discussions about racial profiling, and a viral video viewed by over 20 million people. But Darius Cole's experience wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern that federal law enforcement officers of color had been experiencing for years, rarely with such clear documentation. Black FBI agents had been stopped and detained while conducting surveillance in suburban neighborhoods, assumed to be suspicious rather than federal investigators. Black DEA agents had been confronted while executing warrants, mistaken for the criminals they were arresting. Black U.S. Marshals had been challenged at courthouses where they worked, assumed to be defendants rather than law enforcement. The pattern revealed something fundamental, that even federal badges, even professional conduct, even clear identification couldn't always override the assumption that black people in certain spaces must be criminal rather than legitimate.
that racism operated so deeply that it could make a rookie cop see a stalker where a trained observer would recognize surveillance, see a threat where logic indicated a professional, see criminality where evidence showed law enforcement. Darius returned to his work with the probation office, though the incident left lasting impact professionally and personally. He'd spent 12 years building a reputation for effective professional supervision of high-risk offenders, having an operation compromised not by clever fugitive evasion, but by a rookie's racism became a permanent mark on his record. The fugitive, Trent Williams, was eventually located and arrested 5 weeks after the Maple Street incident, but only after additional federal resources had been expended to find him in Nevada. He was returned to federal custody to serve the remainder of his sentence, with additional time added for the probation violations. The cost of his extended freedom, financial, operational, public safety, stemmed directly from Keene's interference.
3 years after the incident, Darius reflected in an interview. I've supervised some of the most dangerous probationers in the system. I've tracked fugitives across state lines. I've conducted surveillance operations in high-crime areas. And I've never had an operation compromised by the people I was tracking. They understand the game. They know how to evade surveillance. But a 3-month rookie saw me sitting in a car and thought stalker, instead of noticing everything that would have told him I was law enforcement? That's not a training failure. That's a society failure. It's what happens when black people are presumed criminal in any context until we prove otherwise. The reforms implemented in Sacramento County showed measurable results. Stop disparities decreased by 58% in the first year after the new protocols were implemented. The federal liaison position prevented 3 potential confrontations with federal officers in the following 18 months by ensuring proper coordination. Officers showing concerning stop patterns were identified and retrained before serious violations occurred. But the broader lesson extended beyond one department's reforms. The incident forced a national conversation, again, about how racial bias operates in law enforcement, how assumptions override evidence, how black professionals doing their jobs can still be presumed criminal even while conducting lawful surveillance for their own protection. The Bodycam footage remains online, a permanent record of what happens when bias meets authority. Keene's aggressive approach, Darius's professional composure, the escalation, the near violence, the shocked realization, the $7.9 million price tag. The video serves as both warning and evidence. Warning about what happens when departments clear unsuitable officers for duty. Evidence that accountability is possible when violations are documented with perfect clarity. But it also serves as a reminder that no achievement, no badge, no federal authority fully protects black professionals from being presumed criminal. The Darius Cole, 12-year federal officer, experienced investigator, professional conducting lawful surveillance, could be treated as a stalker simply for sitting in a car while black. Assumptions cost lives. In this case, they cost a career, a federal investigation, and the county nearly $8 million. But the real cost is measured in the cumulative weight of being presumed guilty, the exhaustion of having to prove legitimacy, the knowledge that even federal credentials can't always override racial assumptions.